This computer. So, good morning. We are here for the next session of the podcast Beyond Grants with Shannon Hesel of the Water for South Sudan. She is the executive director, and she will talk about her organization and also how she is managing her organization in these difficult times. So, Shannon, thank you so much for this opportunity. Can you please introduce yourself and your organization? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's an honor to be here, Claudio, and appreciate the opportunity to share a little bit more. I'm the executive director, as you mentioned, of Water for South Sudan, and I've been in the role now for about 10 months, so still fairly new to the organization, though not new to the international development world. Water for South Sudan, we've spent more than 20 years partnering with communities across South Sudan to provide access to clean, safe water. As you likely know, South Sudan is one of the newest countries in the world, and it's also one of the least infrastructures. So almost 60% of the population still lacks access to drinking water. Open defecation is the norm in terms of sanitation. And there is no municipal water systems or electrical grid really in the entire country. So we often talk about our work as working in rural water. That means different things to different people, but often I think it sparks images of tiny villages. And the reality is that many of the places that we're working are serving population centers that have thousands and thousands of people who don't have the formal piped systems or water utilities. And our work, really when we began 20 years ago, the focus was drilling wells, and that is certainly still essential to who we are and what we do. But we've now learned that that's just the first step. And so our model really focuses on the systems that keep water flowing in communities for the long haul. That's everything from community governance to maintaining supply chains and building supply chains when those don't exist. A lot of work around hygiene education and programs that strengthen women's economic resilience because we know that women are a lever of change. So our organization has evolved from delivering individual projects to really sustaining water systems, and I often say that we're building water municipalities in a country that doesn't have those, and that evolution is really shaping how we think about both our strategy and how our work is financed.
Beautiful. So my following question is, Water for South Sudan has operated successfully now for years
Yeah.
through longstanding relationship and individual contributions. Now, what signals told you that this model, while working and delivering success, wouldn't sustain the next phase of growth?
Yeah, it's a great question. We've grown in a really grassroots way. About 30% of our revenue still comes from school-based fundraising, inspired by Linda Sue Park's book, A Long Walk to Water, which tells the story of our founder, Salva Dute. So students across the United States and around the world read that book, and they organize fundraisers to support water projects. The rest of our revenue, as you noted, comes primarily from individual donors and some foundations that have supported the organization for many years. And that model has built the foundation of our organization. However, as our work has evolved, the nature of what we're building has become clearer, and our founder, we're really sort of focused on, and a lot of the giving in that strategy is really centered on the founder of the organization, and we need to evolve away from that messaging and that identity. And the book itself, Linda Sue Park, right? We know that her books are being pulled from shelves, that competition for individual gifts, becomes really complicated and really challenging, particularly in this moment in time when there's so much competition for grants. And we really wanted to look for something that's more sustainable. And infrastructure, right, really does require durability, both operationally and financially. So as we're shifting and expanding our strategy to serve more people and reach more communities in South Sudan, we need to evolve the capital model alongside our program model. And so it's not shifting entirely away from philanthropy because we know that that's built the work. But we know that we have to think differently about the tools that are available. And so looking at different models of partnerships, thinking differently about contracts, exploring fee for service models, and other approaches that both support the infrastructure stability or sustainability, but also that broader community resilience focus point that is so essential to our work. Hope, as something that we say frequently here is not a capital strategy, and there's too much volatility in the philanthropy space right now to continue to become the sole source of revenue for the organization.
Great. So I wonder, was there like an inflection point, something like how we support the work at a greater scale and with greater resilience, uh, rather than changing our mission? How do you communicate that distinction to existing donors
Yeah.
and who may worry about abandoning the whole model to make your organization more effective?
Yeah, I think we really lean in and emphasize that the mission itself has not changed, right? We're doing exactly what our supporters care about. We're ensuring and supporting that communities in South Sudan have access to reliable, clean, safe water. What's really shifted is our understanding of what the sustainability of those systems actually requires. And so, if we want to make sure that the wells that we're drilling will last long after we've built that infrastructure, and that includes the governance, the maintenance systems, the spare parts, and the supply chains, and the community ownership, and that we recognize that the revenue diversification really enables us to strengthen those systems in support of the mission that we're already doing, so that the infrastructure that the communities rely on continue to function after the initial project is completed. And if we're able to unlock different kinds of fundraising, that also allows us, or not even fundraising, revenue generation models, that allows us to continue to further our mission, and scale both geographically, but also in terms of how deep we're able to go in each of the communities that we're working, in terms of connecting those communities with the skills and knowledge that they need to maintain their water points, and connecting and building out some of the supply chains in partnership with other kinds of organizations who are already there. So it's a maturation of the organization. It's the same mission. It's stronger systems, and an opportunity for us to do more and do that in a much more in partnership with the folks who have stayed with us in that journey, but also bringing new people, new ways of thinking and operating and funding mechanisms into the fold, who might not already be engaged and connected with us.
Fantastic. So you talked about the donors, the external stakeholders. Now, I believe that there are challenging conversation you already had or you'll be having with internal stakeholders, people within your organization, your team, your board. Tell us more about those conversations that hopefully will make their attitude shift, please.
Yeah, so it's a tricky question because, as we're shifting from a founder-based organization and building on that legacy and building on that foundation into the next phase, a lot of the conversations right now are about winning hearts and minds and educating, bringing people along with that journey. We're fortunate in that we are in the process of building out our strategic plan with an eye towards a vision of 2032. I cannot believe that we're now going into the 2030s, but here we are. And one of the things that becomes really important in that is really putting some emphasizing the importance of revenue diversification, pulling in some of the data around what the state of philanthropy, the state of fundraising is for organizations, really kind of amplifying and helping to educate our internal stakeholders of why we need to start thinking differently about how we're funding the organization. And so that brings, for us the importance of thinking through, how do we expand our own capability as an organization, and moving into that next phase with deeper experience around, infrastructure, financing, different kinds of partnership models. What's our pricing structure? How do we make sure that in those systems that we're building, anything that's being generated through more of a revenue generation model gets reinvested and repurposed in the mission and purpose of the work that we're doing. And I think really kind of looking for that. And one of the things that we've been talking about is building in those proof points or those see to believe moments, and creating some milestones in that strategic plan to be able to do that. So thinking about those broader sets of tools and the different partnerships to be able to do that, and then also thinking about how do we both bring the internal stakeholders that we have along with us in that journey by, educating and relationship building, and also pulling other folks into the organization that have some of that expertise to help support the amplification and the shifting of the mindset, because I think that's the first hurdle of probably many hurdles as we look to make this shift. But also I think is very exciting and certainly is the most important step in setting up a path for success.
Great. Now you talked about capabilities and expertise. So if you had like a magic wand and you would be able to add one or two capabilities to your organization, tomorrow, uh, which would
Yeah.
have the most significant impact and why?
Yeah, I mean, I think that for us, it would have to be about, the contracting model, right? What are our contracting mechanisms and the capability of being a go-to contractor, whether that's infrastructure or expertise? What's our fee for service model that allows, infrastructure operators like us or project managers like us to support the government in South Sudan, other NGOs and entities, or private capital companies, and kind of that expertise and that capacity of looking what that might look like. I also think that there's the capability or sort of thinking differently about what our board composition is, because we're looking at unlocking different kinds of revenue, and so thinking more like a business in terms of revenue generation, to move, beyond that philanthropic mindset, and going into a place of how do we finance different partnership models, and how do we finance the organization but still stay true to that mission. And so I think there's an opportunity to learn from other organizations who have pioneered this work in that space to really think through helping to shape that infrastructure financing and that partnership model for us at our next stage.
Fantastic. My last question. Uh, I'm sure you know there are many other organizations at the same inflection point, given
Yeah.
the crisis when it comes to funding. So what would be one or two things that you wish someone else had told you earlier?
Yeah, so it's interesting. And I think in many ways I'm fortunate in that, we're still fairly early in this process, but I think it's a challenge, right? Because revenue diversification is really governance work first. And it's fundraising or revenue generation work second. And that can be a frustrating position to be in, particularly in this moment in time when organizations want to continue like ours, right? We want to continue to be able to invest and do our mission. And we're very fortunate in that we're, doing well and our fundraising is going okay. But you want to see those see the the fruits of that investment as quickly as possible. And that's the governance piece. It's the winning hearts and minds piece. And so the importance of aligning leadership teams and boards, and as you mentioned, the internal stakeholders, really aligning everybody to the ambition of the organization and the partnership's ambition that requires is massive. And just, I think you can't skip that step. And so that's just a really important piece. And the other thing that I think is really important is that, and we're fortunate to be able to do this at Water for South Sudan, is that, we're fortunate in that we can diversify and think about diversification of our revenue from a position of strength for the most part. We're not desperate for diversification of funds, and that's not always the case. I think, but we can read the writing on the wall. We know that there are big shifts coming, both because of what's happened to the international development sector with the loss of US aid funding and the competition now for philanthropy, but also, I mean, we're so reliant on individual giving and the volatility of everything that's happening in the market. And in the global case, we know that may not be sustainable. And so, really thinking about the discipline of diversification and investing the resources in looking for innovative and new ways to fund and resource the organization is an opportunity and needs to be seen as an opportunity, but not something that we're doing because we're desperate to have to do at this moment. So getting ahead of it, I think, is really important. And, I think we're fairly lucky in that we're able to do that. But it's, I think, a really important lesson to be able to have moving forward and in mind, particularly when it's hard to shift the minds and the mindset, to continue to remind myself just how important this shift is as we look to the next stage of the organization's growth.
Fantastic. Shannon, thank you so much for this interview and from the insights you provided.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Claudio. Cannot wait to listen into all of the future podcasts that you're going to be putting out. I think you're contributing and leading a conversation that's really important for the sector.
Thank you.